Daniel Carter sat on a worn couch in a small apartment in Denver and watched the sky turn strange. He had seen storms before. He had seen red sunsets and summer wildfires. He had never seen black shapes slide across the dawn like knives. He muted the news and leaned toward the window. The shapes were not clouds. They held steady in a sharp line, edge to edge, as if some giant hand had cut the morning. He turned the sound back on. The anchors spoke in careful voices. They said there were ships over the Pacific, over the Atlantic, and over every major city. They said the ships were quiet but huge. A tremor in the signal made the screen go gray for a second. When the picture returned, a cold light washed over the studio. The anchor's voice shook. She said a broadcast was coming from the ships. Maria Lopez called him at the same time. He answered and said he saw it too. She told him to come over. He grabbed a jacket, locked the door, and ran down the stairwell. On the street, people stood with their phones held high. Some prayed, some cursed, some cried without tears. A boy with a school backpack pointed at the sky and asked his mother if those were birds. His mother said no. Maria lived 2 blocks away in a basement apartment that always smelled like coffee and old paper. She was a linguist at the local university. Her walls were covered in taped pages and sticky notes and glass marker scribbles. She met him at the door with her laptop under one arm and a notebook in her hand. He was a systems engineer who had moved into research after a few burned-out years in defense contracting. He trusted lines of code more than people on most days. He trusted Maria all the time. They set up 2 screens on the small table by the window. One showed the city feed. The other showed a global stream full of maps and telemetry and shaky rooftop videos. Foreheads gleamed with sweat in studios around the world. In one clip, a camera drone rose above a skyline and revealed a shadow that stretched from river to river. The shadow was a ship. It did not hum. It did not glow. It just existed, absolute and still. A tone rolled through every speaker and window and mattress spring. It had weight. It pressed on ribs and teeth and the small bones of the ear. Lights flickered. Then a figure appeared on every screen. It was tall and narrow like a walking spire. Its skin looked like slate wet from rain. It had a crest that folded and unfolded like a fan. When it spoke, the words came out already translated in the voice of a calm machine. We are the Vorath. Submit to the order of the Empire. Lay down weapons. Yield governance. Your world will be administered for your safety and for the peace of the stars. The line went silent. The city held its breath. Somewhere outside, a dog barked and could not stop. On the street below, a delivery truck kept inching forward as if nothing had changed, because the driver was late and did not want to lose his job. Maria did not blink. She hit record on 3 devices at once. She wrote the word Vorath 3 times on a sticky note and underlined it. Daniel watched the playback and slowed the audio until each syllable stretched like taffy. The voice had a pattern. The consonants snapped in even time. The pauses were exact. He said he wanted to capture the raw signal. She nodded and said she wanted to capture the mistakes. The figure spoke again. The terms are generous. Noncompliance will be corrected. Resistance will be brief. We require the symbolic surrender of your planetary council. We require silence in your networks until our protocols are installed. We require obedience. The feed cut to a map. Pins appeared over capitals. Pins appeared over power stations and data centers and ports. The pins were not random. Someone had studied Earth for a long time. Someone had drawn a net and now pulled the net tight. People flooded the streets. Some screamed at the sky. Some folded their hands and asked for mercy. Some shouted that this was a trick made by rival nations. A few laughed. Not because it was funny, but because the body sometimes laughs when the world stops making sense. 2 kids in hoodies slapped the bottom of a lamppost to see if the lights would go out. They did not. Daniel and Maria kept working. They moved from the news feed to direct signals. Daniel wrote small scripts to scrape broadcast fragments from ham radio relays. Maria split the phonemes and aligned the timing grid. She mumbled to herself as she wrote down the little stumbles in the alien syntax. Every language has seams. She wanted to find where this one snagged. Governments called emergency sessions. Mayors went on television and told people to stay in their homes. A voice from the White House briefing room said the situation was being assessed. Military jets stayed on the ground because radar had turned to snow. Satellites listened but saw nothing. It was as if the sky had been painted over with a new skin that let light through but caught every beam that tried to bounce back. At noon, the ships moved. Not far, not faster. They drifted a little lower until the edges of their shadows sharpened and the city streets fell dim. The figure returned. It spoke once more. You have one spin of your world to comply. Delay is harm. Harm is against the order. Submit. Maria paused the frame and stared. The face was a mask that did not flex. The eye line was a shallow arc like a horizon. The crest spread and closed with a faint click each time a sentence ended. She pointed at the crest and said it was a marker for punctuation. She pointed at the left side of the mouth and said there was a soft whistle there. She said the whistle came only when the figure spoke the words order and submit. Daniel asked why that mattered. She said fear has a shape. When fear rises, breath changes. Even great empires breathe. He did not argue. He watched the code scroll and tuned the filters and looked for the spaces between words where meaning sometimes hides. He wrote a quick command to overlay the alien timing onto a metronome. The match was perfect. He felt a small thrill and then a bigger worry. If the timing was perfect, then the voice might not be a voice at all. It might be a script. They went to the window. The street had the calm of a sea before a storm. No horns, no sirens. A bicycle leaned against a hydrant. A coffee cup rolled in a slow circle by the curb and would not settle. A woman in a blue jacket held a bag of oranges and looked up. One orange slipped from the top and fell and burst. She did not move. She let the juice run toward her shoes and kept staring at the gray underbelly of the ship. Maria said she wanted to test a theory. She opened her laptop and played the alien speech at a higher pitch, then at a lower one, then backwards, then with the pauses stretched and the consonants clipped. In one version, the words blurred into a hum that sounded like wind in a long tunnel. In another, the hum turned into a drumbeat. She tapped her pencil along with it, and then stopped and smiled a little. She said the beat was 4s and 8s. She said even the pauses were counted. Daniel looked at the map again. Pins over ports. Pins over hubs. Pins over exchange points. He thought of the times he had sat in cold rooms, watching battery stacks hum under blue lights, making sure data flowed. He thought of the rule he had learned when he was young, and terrified he would make a mistake that would bring a system down. Never hit the big red button if you do not know what the button really does. The Vorath had many buttons to push, but maybe they did not understand what would happen when they pushed the human ones. He called a friend in Phoenix named Nate who ran a community radio station. Nate said the phones were dead, but the old transceiver worked fine. Nate said people were calling in on the air and telling jokes. They said if the aliens wanted silence, they had come to the wrong planet. Daniel told him to record everything and send it over the moment he could. Nate said he would. Maria mapped the whistle. It rose 3 tones on order. It dropped 2 on submit. She said the rises and drops matched stress patterns that often appear in ritual speech. She said ritual speech is used when leaders want to look unshakable. She said it also means the words have been said many times before. Daniel asked by whom. She said by many mouths. She said the voice they heard might be a composite drawn from many officers to hide the real one. She said that kind of thing leaves seams too. Afternoon slid toward evening. The ship's shadow turned gold for a breath when the sun dipped, then went back to gray. News said the power grid was stable but fragile. News said markets were closed. News said coastal navies had lost contact with half their ships but saw no evidence of attack. News said food warehouses were fine. News also said not to panic. The message sounded like a prayer. On a nearby block, a group of neighbors set up a table and laid out loaves of bread and jars of peanut butter and jelly. A man with a gray beard sliced apples. A teenager with dyed hair handed out water bottles. Someone brought a guitar. No one sang at first. They just tuned and tuned again because the strings would not hold. Then the teenager found a note that felt right and started a slow, even rhythm. People breathed with it. The dog that had been barking finally lay down and sighed. In the middle of the city, a police lieutenant walked to the station roof and looked up. He did not raise a gun. He put a folding chair down, sat, and wrote in a little book. In a farmhouse in Kansas, a woman named Diane swept her porch and told her brother on the phone that if the aliens wanted to help with crops, they could start with the West Field. In a diner in Maine, a cook kept flipping pancakes because 2 truckers had asked for seconds. He said the batter was paid for and it would be a shame to waste it. Maria and Daniel ate cold noodles and drank W. The morning after the first demand, the city woke under a heavy sky. The ships had not moved away. They floated above the world like silent mountains, throwing shadows that stretched across rivers and fields. People left their houses carefully as if the air itself might break. Some went to work because bills still had to be paid. Others stayed home, staring at screens or waiting for another voice from above. But the world did not stop. Cars still rolled on highways. Coffee still brewed in kitchens. Babies still cried. Life tried to continue. Daniel Carter walked down Colfax Avenue with Maria Lopez at his side. The air was cool and their steps echoed between tall buildings. The community center was ahead, its old brick walls painted with faded murals. Inside, the lights hummed and the smell of floor polish mixed with stale coffee. They unlocked the doors and set up chairs. They did not know who would come. They only knew someone would. At first, only 3 people walked in. A nurse named Ellen, who wore her scrubs under a thick coat, a teacher named Paul, who carried a bag of books, and Nate, the radio operator from Phoenix, who had driven through the night with his van full of equipment. He looked tired but alive. He said people were still laughing on the airwaves. He said he had brought recordings. Maria smiled and asked him to set up in the corner. As the morning grew, more people arrived. A bus driver who knew how to fix engines, a librarian who knew how to gather people quietly, a teenager who knew how to code, a farmer who had driven from outside the city and still had dirt on his boots. Soon the chairs filled and the room buzzed with voices. They had no leader. They had no army. They only had questions, and questions were enough. Daniel stood and told them about the perfect rhythm in the alien speech. He said it sounded like a machine but slipped once when it spoke about smiles. Maria told them about the whistle sound, the breath that betrayed fear. She said no empire could erase fear. She said cracks in their mask were worth more than weapons. The group listened. Some nodded. Some argued. But no one left. While they spoke, the aliens broadcast again. The same figure appeared, its crest opening and closing. It repeated the demand for submission. This time the words were harsher. It listed new rules. No gatherings, no signals outside their approved networks, no flights above the clouds. As the voice spoke, Maria played her recording of the earlier messages at the same time. The group listened closely. The differences were small but real. A slip of tone, a missed beat, a pause too long. The mask was cracking more. Ellen, the nurse, said she had seen this before. She said when people give orders under stress, their bodies betray them. A vein pulses. A breath shortens. Even machines that speak for them cannot hide it forever. She said the aliens were not as calm as they wanted humans to believe. Paul, the teacher, said stories are stronger than fear. He opened one of his books and read a passage about people who kept telling tales during war. He said laughter and stories could be weapons. People clapped softly. Meanwhile, in the streets, small acts of defiance spread. Children drew chalk pictures of the ships with silly faces on the sidewalks. Musicians played in subway stations, their songs echoing louder than fear. In one neighborhood, families hung bedsheets from their windows with painted words, "We are still here." The Vorath patrols did not understand. They marched past, stiff and armored, but the humans kept smiling. Jack Miller, the farmer from the plains, was in the city now. He had stayed after delivering feed to the horses. He came to the community center with calloused hands and simple words. He told them he had driven his tractor through a checkpoint the day before. The aliens shouted, but he kept going. Nothing happened. He said maybe their power was not as strong as it looked. People laughed, not at him but with him, because his story carried hope. Daniel took notes. Maria drew charts on the wall with markers. They began to see a pattern. The aliens wanted silence, but humans answered with noise. The aliens wanted obedience, but humans answered with small acts of freedom. And the more humans smiled, the more the aliens slipped. The group decided to test this. Nate set up his transmitter and broadcast a simple message, a song sung by children in a park nearby. The song spread across the air. It was soft, clumsy, and joyful. The Vorath intercepted it. Their next broadcast came faster than expected, and their tone was sharper than before. The figure said, "Unauthorized signals will be punished." The figure said, "Joy is not necessary." The figure said, "Silence is safety." But as it spoke, Maria caught another whistle. This one cracked in the middle like a note that broke under pressure. She smiled. She pointed it out. Everyone in the room smiled too. The aliens had shown weakness without meaning to. That night, Daniel and Maria walked the streets. The city was quiet but alive. Lanterns hung from balconies. Radios buzzed in kitchens. People whispered stories to each other. Daniel thought about how fragile humans were compared to the ships. But he also thought about how stubborn they were. He thought about the way children laughed even when shadows covered the sky. He thought about how smiles carried more weight than fear. He decided the aliens had chosen the wrong planet. Far away in Washington, D.C., leaders argued in underground chambers. Some wanted to surrender quickly to save lives. Others wanted to fight with weapons they did not fully understand. But word of the smiles spread even there. A senator said her own granddaughter had drawn a picture of the ships with flowers on them. The room fell silent for a moment. Then the debate grew softer. They realized that surrendering might not be necessary if the people themselves refused to bow. The next day, the Vorath patrols grew harsher. They ordered markets to close. They ordered schools to shut down. But the people found ways around it. Teachers gathered children in parks and read books under trees. Farmers sold food from trucks on side streets. Musicians kept playing. The empire had strength, but it did not have imagination. Humans did. At the community center, the group grew larger. New people arrived with skills and courage. A mechanic who fixed old radios. A mother who organized neighbors. A student who knew how to hide messages in code. Together they formed a network. They called it nothing. They gave it no symbol. They just worked. Their goal was simple: to keep smiling, to keep laughing, and to keep showing the aliens they could not crush the spirit of Earth. Daniel realized something important. The Vorath were not just afraid of resistance. They were afraid of unpredictability. Empires can control armies, but they cannot control joy. Joy spreads like wildfire. It slips through cracks. It does not follow rules. He told the group this. Maria agreed. She said humor was their strongest weapon. Not cruel humor, but the kind that made people feel human. They decided to spread more of it. Nate broadcast a joke every hour on the hour. A baker made alien-shaped bread and handed it out for free. Children recorded songs and sent them over the radio waves. The aliens answered with more threats, but their voices shook. Their rhythm faltered. Their masks slipped again and again. The humans only smiled wider. That night, Jack Miller stood at a checkpoint once more. The aliens blocked the road. He did not argue. He did not fight. He simply smiled and drove his tractor forward. The aliens shouted. They waved their weapons. But Jack did not stop. The tractor rumbled past, slow and steady. The aliens did nothing. Onlookers laughed and cheered. The story spread across the city by morning. In their ship, the Vorath commanders grew restless. Reports came in from across the globe. Humans were not obeying. They were mocking. They were laughing. They were smiling. And somehow this was worse than open war, because war they understood. Laughter they did not. Back in the community center, Daniel and Maria prepared for the next step. They wanted to push harder, not with weapons, but with questions and songs. They wanted to show the galaxy that Earth could not be broken. They wanted to turn their small acts of defiance into something larger, something the Vorath could not ignore. The day ended with the city quiet under the shadow of the ship. But the quiet was not fear. It was planning. It was the calm before a new kind of storm, one built not on missiles but on spirit. Humans were ready, and somewhere deep in their ships the Vorath began to wonder if they had made the greatest mistake of their empire. The third day under the alien ships began with a heavy silence. The Vorath had issued their warnings, yet Earth refused to bend. The air felt thick, not from heat but from tension. People moved carefully, but they still moved. Markets opened in side streets. Children whispered in corners, and radios hummed softly with jokes and music. The world seemed fragile, yet at the same time strong in a way no empire could measure. Daniel Carter woke before sunrise. He sat at Maria's kitchen table with a cup of cold coffee and a stack of notes. The recordings they had gathered from the Vorath were laid out in neat rows. He saw patterns everywhere, pauses, tones, small cracks. He traced them like maps, as if each sound carried a secret. Maria joined him with her notebook. Her hair was tied back, her eyes sharp. She pointed at the lines he had drawn and added symbols of her own. Together they built a picture of fear hiding behind power. Later that morning they walked to the community center. The streets were quiet but not empty. Jack Miller passed them with a sack of grain slung over his shoulder. He nodded and said he was heading to a stable where the children liked to visit. His calm steps gave Daniel strength. At the center, more people had gathered than ever before. Teachers, nurses, mechanics, artists, even children sat on the floor listening. The room buzzed with the sound of hope. Maria stood and told them what she had discovered. The Vorath voice was slipping more each time. The mask cracked when humans smiled, laughed, or refused to follow the script. She explained that empires thrived on control, but laughter broke control apart. Daniel added that the Vorath feared unpredictability. He said every joke, every song, every story was a weapon the aliens could not block. The crowd listened, nodding, and their fear softened. Nate set up his transmitter again. He played a recording of a street band from New Orleans. The horns blared, the drums pounded, and people clapped along even though the aliens had forbidden gatherings. The music rolled through the city, bouncing off walls and rising to the shadow of the ship above. Within an hour, the Vorath broadcast again. Their voice was sharp, their rhythm broken. They demanded silence, but everyone who listened could hear it. The mask was thinner than before. Meanwhile, across the world, humans found small ways to resist. In Japan, schoolchildren folded paper cranes and left them in neat rows on the steps of buildings. In Italy, church bells rang at random hours, confusing the patrols. In Africa, farmers painted bright colors on the ground, visible from the sky, spelling words of hope in languages the aliens could not read. Every act sent a signal. Earth was alive and Earth would not kneel. Back in Denver, Maria proposed a plan. She wanted to push the Vorath further. She said they needed to create a broadcast so unpredictable the aliens would be forced to respond. Daniel agreed, though he knew the risk. If the Vorath grew desperate, they might strike harder. But the group voted, and the answer was clear: they would not stop. They worked all day. Teachers wrote stories. Children sang songs. Musicians strummed guitars. Jack Miller recorded a simple message. I am a farmer. I grow food. I will not stop. Maria stitched it all together with care. Daniel checked the timing, breaking the rhythm the aliens expected. When the sun set, Nate flipped the switch and the broadcast flew across the air. The response came fast. The Vorath figure appeared, its crest snapping open too quickly. The word stumbled. Unauthorized. Unauthorized. It repeated, the rhythm lost. Maria leaned forward, her eyes wide. She whispered that the mask was failing. Then the figure froze for a heartbeat, and for the first time they heard a real voice beneath the machine. It was strained, almost desperate. Stop smiling, it said. Then the feed cut, the room erupted. People clapped, laughed, even cried. The aliens had revealed themselves. They were not gods. They were not unshakable. They were afraid. Daniel felt his heart race. Maria gripped his arm and said this was the proof they needed. The Vorath had cracks and Earth had found them. That night the city glowed with quiet joy. Lanterns hung in windows. Radios played soft songs. Children drew new chalk pictures on sidewalks. People smiled at each other, not because the danger was gone, but because they had seen the Empire flinch. Daniel and Maria walked through the streets, tired but hopeful. They knew the fight was not over, but they also knew Earth had already changed the balance. The Vorath had demanded submission, and humanity had only smiled. The smile was now stronger than fear. In their ships, the Vorath commanders argued. Reports from across the planet spoke of laughter, music, defiance. Other worlds under their rule might be watching. Rebellion was contagious. If Earth continued, the Empire itself might shake. One commander demanded a full strike. Another warned that such an act could spark greater resistance. They had come to conquer, but instead they found a people who refused to bow. The Vorath were beginning to doubt their own power. As dawn approached, Daniel wrote in his notebook. He wrote that humanity's greatest weapon was not steel or fire. It was spirit. It was the ability to smile under shadow, to laugh in the face of fear, to keep living when the world said stop. He closed the notebook and looked at Maria, who was already scribbling notes for the next plan. Jack Miller sat nearby, cleaning his boots, ready for another day of quiet defiance. The world outside was still under alien shadow, but inside the human heart light was spreading fast. The fourth day under the alien ships began with tension across every continent. The Vorath had grown restless. Their broadcasts were more frequent, their words sharper, their rhythm broken in places where once it was perfect. Humans heard it and they smiled. The cracks were widening, but with each crack came danger. No one knew what the Empire would do when cornered. In Denver, Daniel Carter and Maria Lopez sat at the long wooden table in the community center. Around them, the group had grown larger. Mechanics, students, musicians, farmers, and neighbors filled the room. Jack Miller leaned back in his chair, his boots dusty, his hands folded. Nate adjusted his transmitter, testing the frequencies. Ellen the nurse scribbled notes about supply stations and medicines. Everyone was tired, but no one was broken. Maria stood and spoke. She said the Vorath were losing control of their mask. She said the words were slipping because humans refused to be silent. She reminded them that laughter, music, and defiance were their strongest tools. Daniel added that unpredictability was their shield. He said empires did not understand chaos born from joy. The group agreed to push harder. That morning they planned a larger act. They wanted the Vorath to see humanity not just as one city, but as one world. Nate suggested a global broadcast. Maria suggested mixing languages and songs so the aliens could not find rhythm. Daniel said they should include stories, true stories of simple people refusing to stop living. Jack Miller offered to record his voice again. He said he would tell them about his fields, about tractors, about stubborn soil. His plain words carried weight. The group worked all day. Children sang songs in Spanish, English, and French. Teachers read old poems. Farmers recorded simple messages. Musicians played instruments from different cultures. Nate stitched them together into a broadcast that had no pattern, no order, no predictability. It was human in every way. When the sun set, the signal was sent across the world. The response was immediate. The Vorath figure appeared again. Its crest flared too quickly, its eyes glowed unevenly. The rhythm was broken. Unauthorized. Unauthorized, it stammered. Then the real voice slipped through again, strained and angry. You are spreading chaos. Stop smiling. The feed cut abruptly, leaving silence. But across the earth, laughter followed. In New York, crowds gathered in the streets, clapping and cheering. In small villages, people lit fires and sang. In cities under heavy shadows, chalk drawings covered walls with pictures of ships turned upside down. The Vorath wanted silence, but Earth grew louder. Inside the Vorath command ship, tension rose. Commanders argued, their crests stiff with unease. One demanded immediate strikes. Another warned of rebellion spreading to other worlds. Reports came in that enslaved planets were intercepting Earth's signals. Whispers of resistance had begun. The Empire faced something it had never known before: defiance without fear. Back at the community center, Maria was deep in her notes. She told Daniel she had noticed something new. The alien speech cracked most when humans laughed together. She said laughter was not just sound, it was rhythm-breaking noise. Daniel agreed. He said humans were showing the galaxy a different kind of strength. He looked around the room at tired faces lit by small lamps and saw determination. They had no weapons strong enough to match the ships, but they had each other. That night, the Vorath made their move. A fleet of patrol ships descended on Denver. Alarms rang. People rushed to shelters. The sky roared as engines cut through the air. Maria and Daniel stayed inside the center, their radios on. Jack Miller stood at the door, calm as ever. He said he would not hide. Nate kept broadcasting, his hands steady. The patrols landed, their metallic legs striking the ground. The aliens marched forward, weapons raised. They expected fear, but they found something else. The people gathered in the streets, holding candles and lanterns. They began to sing. A soft tune at first, then louder until it filled the city. Children sang. Elders sang. Strangers held hands. The aliens froze, confused. Their orders demanded silence. But silence was gone. The Vorath commander shouted through a speaker. Stop this noise, his voice cracked. The people kept singing. Maria held her recorder high. Daniel whispered that this was the moment. The Vorath fired warning shots into the sky, but no one ran. Jack Miller stepped forward and placed his hands on his hips. He smiled. The crowd followed, smiles glowing like lanterns. The aliens wavered. Their lines faltered. And then, without a word, they pulled back. The patrols returned to their ships and rose into the air, leaving behind a city still singing. News of the standoff spread across the world. Other cities followed. In Paris, crowds filled the streets with violins. In Cairo, drummers pounded rhythms all night. In small towns and villages, people sang in their own languages, refusing to fall silent. The Vorath ships hung heavy above them, but they did not strike. The Empire had the power, but it no longer had control. Inside the community center, Daniel wrote notes by candlelight. He said humanity had proven something important. The Vorath could scare, they could threaten, but they could not erase the human spirit. Maria said the world was showing the galaxy what it meant to live free. She said the Vorath had underestimated them. Jack Miller leaned back in his chair and said he had fields to plant when this was over. His calm words made the room laugh. In the Vorath council chamber, the commanders argued again. Some demanded destruction. Others feared rebellion across their empire. They had never seen a people fight with smiles, stories, and songs. They did not know how to respond. The cracks in their mask widened further. As dawn broke on the 5th day, Earth stood stronger than before. The ships still hung in the sky, but they no longer felt like mountains. They felt like shadows waiting for the light to burn them away. Humanity had faced the demand for submission and answered with defiance. They had chosen joy over fear, laughter over silence, and though the danger was not gone, the world knew one truth. The Vorath were not unbeatable. They were already afraid. Daniel closed his notebook and looked at Maria. She was still writing, her face lit by morning light. Around them, their friends rested, ready for another day. The fight was not over, but hope was alive, and hope, they knew, was the strongest weapon of all. The 5th day under the alien ships began with a strange quiet. The Vorath fleet still covered the sky, but they had not attacked. The patrols had retreated the night before. Their commanders had watched the people sing, and they had pulled back. It was the first time the Empire had stepped away without forcing obedience. The world woke to hope. Daniel Carter walked through the streets at dawn. The city was scarred by fear, yet it was alive. Candles still burned in windows. Chalk drawings still decorated sidewalks. A bakery had reopened its doors and handed out loaves of bread shaped like the alien crest, each one sold with a smile. People greeted each other warmly, not with fear but with determination. Daniel felt strength in every step. At the community center, Maria Lopez was already working. She had not slept much. Her notes filled entire walls, lines and arrows linking every detail of the Vorath speech. She told Daniel the cracks were deeper than they thought. The Vorath voice had slipped too often. It was no longer just a mask breaking. It was the Empire itself showing weakness. Daniel nodded. He believed her. The Vorath were afraid. By mid-morning, the center was crowded again. Ellen the nurse brought updates from clinics. Paul the teacher arrived with new stories gathered from children. Nate adjusted his radio and played recordings of laughter from around the world. Jack Miller sat by the door, steady as always, his boots dusty and his face calm. The group was larger now, filled with people who wanted to do more than survive. They wanted to show the Vorath that Earth would never kneel. Maria stood and spoke. She said the time had come to send one final message, not just to the Vorath, but to the entire galaxy. She said the enslaved worlds were listening. She said Earth had to show them that defiance was possible. Daniel added that it was not about war. It was about spirit. He said they had to prove that joy was stronger than fear. The group agreed. They would prepare the greatest broadcast yet. They worked all day. Musicians came from nearby towns with instruments. Singers joined, their voices strong. Poets read verses in many languages. Farmers told stories of fields and seeds. Children laughed into microphones, their giggles carrying across the air. Jack Miller recorded his words again. He spoke simply. We are people of Earth. We plant, we sing, we laugh, we live. We do not submit. His steady voice carried more weight than any weapon. When the sun set, Nate connected transmitters across cities. The broadcast went out, a flood of sound and life. It carried music, stories, jokes, and hope. It spread across oceans, across mountains, across villages and cities. It rose into the sky where the Vorath ships waited. The Empire could not block it. The signal broke through. The Vorath responded quickly. The figure appeared on screens again, its crest opening and closing too fast. The rhythm was gone. The words stumbled. Unauthorized. Chaos. Silence. It tried to say. Then for the third time, the mask failed. A real voice broke through, rough and desperate. Stop, you will destroy us, Maria gasped. She told the crowd to listen carefully. The Vorath had admitted fear. Not fear of Earth's weapons, but fear of Earth's spirit. The people cheered. The alien feed cut abruptly, leaving silence. But the silence was filled with human laughter. In cities across the world, crowds filled the streets. In London, bells rang through the night. In Mexico City, fireworks lit the sky. In villages in Africa, drums pounded in rhythm with voices. In Asia, lanterns floated into the night air. Earth was no longer afraid. Earth was alive. Inside the Vorath Council chamber, panic spread. Reports poured in that enslaved worlds were rebelling. Signals from Earth had reached them, inspiring defiance. Small uprisings began. Whispers of freedom spread like fire. The Empire faced what it had always feared, a spirit it could not control. Some commanders demanded a retreat. Others called for destruction, but fear split them apart. Back in Denver, the community center was louder than ever. People hugged. They laughed. They planned for the future. Daniel looked around and saw hope glowing brighter than any shadow. Maria stood by the wall, exhausted but smiling. Jack Miller leaned against the door, his arms crossed, calm and steady. Nate wiped sweat from his brow, his transmitter still buzzing. They had done what no army could do. They had broken the mask of the Empire. At dawn, the ships began to move. Slowly, one by one, they drifted upward. The shadows lifted from cities and fields. Sunlight poured through where darkness had hung for days. People cheered, waved, and cried with joy. The Vorath fleet pulled away from Earth. The Empire had come demanding submission. They left in silence, broken by smiles. News spread fast. The Galactic Council, watching from afar, sent messages to Earth. They said humanity had earned a seat among the stars. They said the galaxy had seen what Earth had done. Daniel, Maria, and Jack were called to speak before the Council. They traveled not as conquerors, but as representatives of a people who refused to bow. In the great chamber of the Council, under ceilings high as the sky, the three stood humbly. Daniel spoke of resilience. Maria spoke of laughter and language. Jack spoke simply of planting fields and living free. The chamber was silent, then filled with applause. Earth had shown the galaxy that strength was not just weapons, but spirit. Back home, life began to return to normal. Markets reopened. Schools welcomed children. Musicians played openly in streets. Farmers returned to fields. The scars of fear remained, but they healed under laughter. The Vorath were gone, but their warning stayed. Never underestimate Earth, Daniel wrote in his notebook. He wrote that Earth had faced the demand for submission and answered with a smile. He wrote that joy had been their weapon, laughter their shield, and unity their victory. He wrote that the galaxy would never forget what humans had done. Maria placed her notes in a box. She said the story must be told again and again, so future generations would remember. Jack returned to his fields. He planted seeds, steady as always. He said the soil was stubborn, but so was he. His simple words carried hope, and so Earth stood free. The ships were gone. The people had won, not with fire, but with spirit. The Vorath had come demanding obedience. Humanity had only smiled. That smile carried across the stars, a symbol of defiance, resilience, and hope. The galaxy had changed forever.